Alright, a while ago I submitted my partner program application, but I never got a reply. And after this video, I don't think I'll ever get one, because we're gonna take a look at some of Guild Wars 2's Gemstore practices. Now don't get me wrong, ArenaNet is far from the only company doing this, but I'm a Guild Wars 2 player, so that's what I'm gonna be looking into. And if you think I'll mainly focus on quality of life purchases being forced upon us, you're wrong. Well, not entirely, but those are only the tip of the iceberg. First, we need to understand why ArenaNet would prefer to use gems instead of showing you a dollar amount whenever you make an in-game purchase. It's not that they can, by the way, because we can buy expansions with money. It's that it's probably not that beneficial to them. Now, there are various reasons as to why any company might prefer to deal in premium currency rather than using real-world money. The most inconspicuous would be uniformity of transactions. By using gems, the in-game store only needs pricing in a single currency as opposed to having duplicate items in their database for every single one, which could also potentially slow down the store, and they wouldn't want to do that because that might make you rethink that impulse buy. I'd assume this also prevents potential abuse by using a VPN to try and buy items cheaper should they mess up the exchange rate. A much more malignant reason for using gems is that we humans dissociate the value of money as soon as there is an in-between currency. Casinos know and use this, and studies have shown that people tend to place more and higher bets with chips than if they were to use cash. Now let's apply this to Guild Wars 2. What if I told you that you just spent $20 on a plush griffin skin? Maybe that's not a lot to you, and that's fair. But what if you now prefer having all plush skins for your mounts? Well, then that total increases to $120. You won't feel like you've paid that much money though, because all plush skins are rarely available at the same time. So while you'll be spending the same, it'll be much lower quantities and it will feel less than paying $120 because you are gonna be thinking in gems. That brings me to the quantities you can purchase. And I might have to give some points to Guild Wars 2 because they do have some in-between amounts like the $35 pack, making it much easier to quickly buy that pack of infinite gathering tools. Or should I be giving them points for this? It sure prevents you from buying that $50 pack, but you might also feel like you've been spending a tad too much on the game if you had to buy that 5, then that 10, and finally that $20 pack to get to the same amount. And I know buying those 3 is the exact same as buying the $35 one, but try it and see how much time you have to think about what you're doing and whether you still want to go through with your purchase by the time you confirm your credit card info for a third time. Now, a bigger issue is that the gem amounts do not line up with most purchases at all. If you want a singular infinite gathering tool, then you have 2 options. Either you buy the $5 and $10 pack separately and you'll have 200 gems left over, or you go for the much more convenient $20 pack instead, leaving you with 600 extra. And what would you do with those leftover gems? Keeping them for a future purchase is probably the best idea, but most people are gonna spend them simply because they're there. A second option would be to effectively waste them. If you have more than 125, you could maybe buy a blackline chest key, or maybe you choose to convert them to gold. Not a big deal, but that amount really starts to add up if you're the kind of person who buys gems a couple of times per year. A third option is realizing that those 600 gems you now have left over is just 400 shy of getting your second gathering tool. It isn't all bad though, because we can also convert gold to gems. So if you're a savvy player that knows how to make gold, you could buy that 800 gem bundle and then convert some gold to come up with the missing 200 to finally buy that gathering tool. Or maybe you can even come up with the full amount, effectively negating the need to buy gems at all. And while I'm sure quite a few players manage to do this, there is a reason ArenaNet is making more than 60 million per year. Have you also never wondered why you can't see a running tally of how much you have spent in the gem store? Well, if you could, you probably wouldn't like the answer. Because how would you feel if you realized you spent over 5,000 or maybe even over 10,000 on the game despite never feeling like a so-called MMO whale? Chances are you've done this if you've been playing the game for over a decade without even realizing it. If you've been playing for as long as the game has been live and you've chosen to spend about $50 per month on average, then you'll have spent $600 per year. Since the game's been out for over 12 years now, that gets us to about 7k total, excluding the cost of the base game and however much you've spent on the expansions of course. And let's also not forget about needing to buy those Living World seasons either, unless you were around when they originally released. If you're not the kind of player who spends gems monthly, but rather when you feel the need to upgrade a character for example, you can get there just as fast. See, ArenaNet is great at selling quality of life, especially when it's time to try out new professions. To showcase this, let's start by looking at a basic character which comes with a 20 slot bag already equipped and 4 extra slots. The 20 slots will fill up really fast, but equipping 4 more bags isn't too expensive and should be enough for most new players. Now when you're playing that character most of the time, back slots will eventually be one of the first quality of life purchases you will consider, and they're conveniently priced at 400 gems each, which doesn't sound too high. If then at one point you decide you want to max out your bank space, you can buy up to 10 extra slots, meaning you probably won't ever run out of inventory space again. So let's say we decide to splurge and spend 4000 gems, because we feel that this character, this profession is the one. That will bring our tally to $50. A big selling point for Guild Wars 2 is the ability to change builds and gear on the fly, allowing you to cover any rolling group content or swap back and forth between open world builds without the hassle of having to drag multiple gear sets along or having to redo your skills and trade setup every single time. This hasn't always been the case, but a couple of years ago ArenaNet made it possible by introducing build and equipment templates. Every character will start with 2 equipment templates as well as 3 build templates. And if you're anything like me, you like covering all roles on the character you're currently committed to. So those templates will be a bit restrictive, but fret not, because we can get 7 more equipment templates and 6 more build templates on the Gemstore. An equipment template will cost 500 gems, which is a tad annoying because if I get 400, I come up short. And if I buy 800, I'm still 200 short of getting my second template. I could also get all 7, but I will still end up overspending. Build templates on the other hand are a bit cheaper at 300 gems each, and it is convenient that for every $10 I want to spend, I get both an equipment and a build template. The annoying part is that I can get 7 extra equipment templates, but only 6 more for builds. Kind of how you can never seem to find the right amount of hot dogs and buns in a grocery store. Since this character will be our main, we're gonna decide to unlock all templates so that we can swap between 9 builds freely. This isn't a crazy number, by the way. If you can play a power and condi DPS build, a quickness and alacrity healer, and then a power and or condi quickness and alacrity support, you're gonna fill up those really fast. And that only covers group content, because you might also want a slot for the open world, and maybe want to cover world v world and PvP. Buying all of these templates will cost us 5300 gems, for which we don't have a perfect option in the store. Since we don't want to grossly overspend, getting the 1600 and 4000 packs will be our best bet, because we also don't have any left over from the 4000 we already spent on our back slots. So this now brings our tally from $50 to $120 and means that we will have more back space than we realistically need and can cover whatever build we want to play. Now here's the thing, backslot expansions, build template expansions and equipment template expansions are all character bound. Consume them and they're gone. So if at any point you decide you don't like playing your character anymore, maybe because you're not a fan of the balance changes, or you've grown bored after playing them hours on end, you might want to look at the Gemstore once more for your next alt. If you play long enough, chances are you'll eventually end up with 9 fully decked out characters, which comes at a cheap cost of over $1000, because I'm gonna assume you'll already have spent those leftover gems from before on something else in the meantime. Spending money in this game is made very easy, by the way, because ArenaNet is kind enough to allow us to save our payment information so that we don't have to look for a credit card every single time, and PayPal also allows us to link our bank account so we don't have to charge up our account for every single purchase. This, once more, is not unique to Guild Wars 2. Have you ever wondered why mobile games give you that new player bonus pack of premium currency almost for free? Or why they sell those value packs, which we also have in Guild Wars 2, by the way? Not necessarily because they want to kickstart your account, but it sure does help you register your payment information for a future, potentially bigger purchase. Like with almost anything else in life, thinking outside of the box has the possibility of saving you quite a bit of money. In our case, instead of unlocking those extra back slots or build and equipment templates, we could also choose to buy a character slot instead. Those will only set us back 800 gems and will give us those 5 initial back slots as well as those 2 equipment and 3 build templates. And let's say you want to play a necromancer. Well, you could make one character for the open world, and by using ritualist gear in one of the 2 sets, you could repurpose them as an alacrity scourge for group content as well. You'll then want a second character to cover DPS builds, which coincidentally also use the same gear as quickness harbingers. And you'll probably want one more to also cover healing. Even if you bought all 3 of those character slots, you'd only have spent 2400 gems or $30. And you'll get the exact same amount of back slots and build templates, but you'll only have 6 equipment templates to work with. But that's not that bad for only a fourth of the cost. Account upgrades are another great example of how ArenaNet is great at solving non-existing problems. Gathering tools and 2 out of 3 salvage-o-matics are another one, as they all have in-game equivalents that will not cost you any money. And I myself fall into this trap more often than not too, by the way, as I too think it'll be nice never having to worry about running out of gathering tools or salvage kits ever again, or that I'll spend enough time fishing to finally make that infinite lure worth it. And all of these items are gonna create a second problem, because it's gonna be annoying to put them back into your bank at the end of every session if you wanna make sure you can use them on multiple characters. I know that this is the definition of a first world problem, but ArenaNet came up with the perfect solution to their own limitations of only allowing us to equip them on a single character at any given time. They gave us shared inventory slots. And the worst is that I would argue that those are some of the best quality of life purchases if you play multiple characters. You'll also notice that you never seem to have enough of them. Excluding the premium launch passes, there are already 5 teleportation scrolls. And if you play fractals, having those infinite potions is ever so convenient as well at that point. And we might as well buy 3 more for the Savage Omatics. And that's before the 3 that you might want to dedicate to your infinite gathering tools if you like gathering on multiple characters. I won't fault them for this. They're a major convenience, but they're not game breaking if you don't have them. Then there's a category of items I really dislike, because I feel like it's taking advantage of players with less game knowledge and newer ones in particular. There is a whole assortment of items you can spend your money on that will only give you a temporary boost at best, or are a very expensive way to progress a character. If you've watched any of my gathering guides, you know how much of a proponent I am of having an item booster. Even worse, I believe some farms aren't even worth doing without one. Here's the thing though, you can get a permanent item boost by getting the candy corn gobbler during Halloween, and while that will still set you back 300 gems, it's a much better deal than paying the same amount for only 6 hours of a single boost. Character progression is even more egregious in my opinion. See, if you've just leveled up a character for the first time, you might not feel like going through the hassle again straight after, even if you end up not liking your current one. All of those problems can go away for the mere cost of 2000 gems or 1600 right now because they're 20% off. That's $20 to $25, but let's not forget that any bag or equipment and build slots you bought on the first one will not carry over. Players who have played the game long enough will know that you can just play a bit of World v World and you will get tomes of knowledge that will grant you a level each. Sure, it's not as fast as swiping, but you're playing the game and $25 is a very steep cost, especially if you don't know about this. This also doesn't mean that I think they need to be abolished from the Gemstore though, but I do presume that people who don't know the ins and outs of this game will be more prone to buying them than if they knew. And then there's one more, and it's a big one, loot boxes, which Guild Wars 2 not only has in the form of blackline chest keys, but also die kits and mount selection licenses. If you watched any of my streams, you might have already noticed that I can't buy any of them. Not because I asked ArenaNet to disable them, but because the Belgian legislator doesn't allow the sale of loot boxes if the exact odds aren't published. Now, if you've recently opened a chest, you might be confused by this statement, because you'll be sure you've seen odds next to every single category. Well, it's those odds I take issue with. To explain this, we're gonna use Shiny Meta's research, who frankly has done a favor to the community by analyzing the drop rates of thousands of boxes. I'll link their research as well as their video in the pinned comment, which I definitely recommend you check out next. The first problem is that the drop rates are unnecessarily vague. The 3% you see next to the uncommon tab is actually the chance to get an item from this category if you happen to get a 5th drop. If you've opened chests before, you'll know that most of the time you'll only get 4. Then there's the fact that the items within the category all have varying drop rates as well. Blackline tickets, for example, drop much more frequently, as if ArenaNet put them 4 separate times into this pool. And exclusives also have a higher drop rate than the tickets, but they're not really in this pool, and they also get removed once they drop for you. Then ArenaNet further convolutes the system by giving a drop rate range for rares. But they won't of course tell us which item has which drop rate, further obfuscating what you can expect if you were to open a chest. And lastly, we have the super rares, which again, according to Shiny Meta, might not be all that correct. Now, Shiny Meta themselves state that their dataset might be an outlier, and even if it is, I'd still prefer to see the drop chance per item, not for any drop from a specific category. There's one more thing, but before I dive into this, I want to say I'm gonna give ArenaNet the benefit of the doubt. There is an article by Game Developer about how certain companies like Nexon use data to dynamically rebalance drop rates of their loot boxes. I'm not saying this is happening in Guild Wars 2 at all, by the way. But we do have a bit of an unlucky topic to talk about, and those are the blackline statuettes, which are also one of the drops from the chest. Luck would have it that Shiny Meta conducted the same research in 2021 as well, so now we not only have those 17,000 chests from this year, but another 33,000 from before the blackline chest was updated. Between those datasets, it turns out that before we could buy blackline exclusives from a vendor, you'd get a 7.5% chance of getting 2 to 4 bonus statuettes. This was quietly changed by ArenaNet to only 3% for 2 extra. Again, I don't really think this is malice. What I think happened is that ArenaNet updated their systems, gave us a new vendor with items we've been asking for ages, and then they decided it was probably also time to review the chests themselves. But it doesn't look great either. Whether you find opening these chests expensive or not will depend on your own financial situation. They cost about $1.50 per chest, and they do get cheaper the more you buy in one go. It's a shame, of course, that none of their prices again line up with any of the amounts of gems you can purchase. But hey, if you had those 600 gems left over from my example at the start of the video, then maybe you could try your luck and buy 6 keys. There's one argument I've been neglecting, but that still needs to be made. Nothing you get from these chests will grant you any player power. Sure, getting one of the super rares is probably some of the best quality of life you can get for your account, but you can also just buy them for gold from other players who were lucky enough to drop one. So yeah, I don't think the Gemstore is that bad in general, and the fact that you can convert gold to gems is nice, but let's also not forget that ArenaNet is the one controlling that exchange rate. None of the things you can buy are really needed either, but sometimes they do solve problems that shouldn't have been in the game in the first place.